Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Harry Potter is one of those stories that can be discussed endlessly. Hundreds of characters, thousands of events, and millions of tiny details make this world an inexhaustible source of mysteries. Today I want to tell you about 5 hidden details that few people notice. But keep in mind, none of this should be taken too seriously. It's a mix of book facts, fan observations, and wild theories. Enjoy watching. Number 1. A dream come true. Everyone remembers that, in his youth, Tom Riddle dreamed of becoming a defense against the dark arts teacher. He wanted it obsessively, so much so that, when denied, he cursed the position itself. Since then, no professor of defense against the dark arts has lasted more than a year. But Voldemort's dream still came true, in a twisted way. By merging with Quirrell's body, he literally attended every lesson. You could say Tom Riddle finally got the job, just not in the way he expected. Of course, it brought him no joy. Quirrell turned out to be a terrible teacher, so bad that even Dolores Umbridge would have approved of his methods. And as for influence on the students, none. No recruitment, no ideology, just stammering and sweat. So why did Voldemort want to teach in the first place? The answer lies in his obsession with Hogwarts itself. Our castle is a stronghold of ancient magic. Voldemort penetrated many of its secrets, but knew that others still lay hidden. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Riddle never wanted to teach. He wanted power over young minds. He saw Hogwarts as the perfect place to begin forming his army. And in that sense, ironically, through Quirrell's body, his dream truly did come true. Number 2. Unicorn blood. Unicorn blood can save even the dying, but at a cost, a curse that lasts forever. We remember this from the first book. But what exactly does that curse mean? Did Voldemort become more insane, more monstrous, or did the curse manifest in another way? At first glance, it seems like Rowling simply forgot about it, since we never see the consequences. But on closer inspection, things get more intriguing. Why would the Dark Lord even need unicorn blood if his Horcruxes already made him immortal? Yes, his body was weak, but he couldn't die, so why risk killing magical creatures in the Forbidden Forest? Unicorn blood has strengthened me. You saw my faithful Quirrell drinking it in the forest. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. The key lies in that line. It was Quirrell who drank the blood, not Voldemort. And if we remember that the Dark Lord was literally parasitizing his host's body, everything becomes clear. In the Goblet of Fire, he admits that when he possessed living creatures, he slowly killed them. When I inhabited animals, their lives were short. None of them lasted long. So Quirrell was doomed. His body was collapsing under the weight of another soul. To keep his host alive a bit longer, Voldemort resorted to the desperate act, forcing him to drink unicorn blood. Thus, the blood wasn't saving Voldemort. It was saving Quirrell. But the curse naturally fell upon the one who shed the blood. That's why the poor professor perished and turned to dust. Number 3. The serpent's essence. Later, Voldemort used unicorn blood again, this time for his own purposes. It became part of the potion through which he created himself a temporary body, one that sustained him until his full resurrection. A potion brewed from unicorn blood and the venom Nagini so generously provided. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. And that's when his serpentine features began to emerge. The grey eyes, pale skin, and nose reduced to slits. Before that, Tom Riddle, even after creating several Horcruxes, still looked human. But after the ritual with Nagini's venom, he lost his humanity completely. Why? Because Nagini's venom is unique. She wasn't just a snake, she was a maledictus, a woman cursed to live as a serpent forever. Her venom carried traces of human magic, intertwined with the curse itself. By using it, Voldemort essentially fused his essence with that of a maledictus, becoming something part human, part snake. So his new appearance wasn't merely the reflection of a twisted soul. It was the result of a magical fusion. In a way, the Dark Lord's resurrected form was a living piece of alchemy, a blend of blood, venom, and curse woven into one. Number 4, redemption. Everyone knows murder splits the soul. But can it ever be repaired? Yes, said Hermione softly, but it's excruciatingly painful. You have to feel remorse. Real remorse. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. That means there's a way to save even the most shattered soul. And perhaps one person truly went through it. Albus Dumbledore. During a youthful quarrel with his brother Aberforth and his friend Grindelwald, their sister Ariana was killed. We never learned whose spell struck her down, but Dumbledore blamed himself for the rest of his life. It's possible he was the one who cast the fatal spell, and in doing so, tore his own soul apart. Later, after years of guilt and reflection, he may have healed it through remorse. That's where his wisdom, pain, and saintly understanding of death came from. That's why Dumbledore knew Voldemort could never be redeemed. A man who cannot love or repent will remain forever divided. Number 5. Cats feel everything. Cats have long been considered companions of witches. They see what is hidden and sense magic better than any spell. In the Harry Potter world, this bond appears especially intriguing. Cats constantly surround Squibs. Argus Filch and his loyal Mrs. Norris are practically one being. Arabella Figg lives among dozens of cats. Coincidence? Hardly. Cats likely sense a magical aura that lingers even in those who can't cast spells. Squibs aren't muggles. They can see dementors, feel magic. Perhaps cats are instinctively drawn to those who live on the border between the magical and the mundane. And maybe that's the deeper message. In Rowling's world, even those without magic remain part of it. Their gift manifests differently, through love, compassion, and loyal cats. Number 6. The scar is not just a mark. The lightning-shaped scar was never just a wound. The killing curse leaves no mark, no trace, only silence. Yet Harry carried a symbol that burned, pulsed, and reacted as if alive. It wasn't the curse that marked him, but the collision of two forces, Voldemort's death spell and Lily Potter's protection. Love as powerful as your mother's leaves its own mark, Dumbledore told him. The scar became the channel where that magic fused. Its shape, lightning, was not random. It symbolized the spark of divine energy that bridged life and death, good and evil. It was the visual trace of a spell that both killed and saved in the same breath. Each time Harry's scar throbbed, it wasn't pain alone. It was resonance. The piece of Voldemort's soul inside him stirred whenever its master drew near. The scar acted like a lightning rod, conducting that dark current between them. When Voldemort grew stronger, Harry felt it. When he felt rage or fear, the scar burned. It was proof of their unnatural bond, but also of the power that Voldemort could never understand, the union of sacrifice and survival. The scar wasn't a curse at all. It was the mark of balance, a reminder that from death came protection, and from darkness, the first flash of light. Number 7. The secret of the Mirror of Erised. The Mirror of Erised never simply reflected dreams. It reflected longing so deep that it crossed the line between life and death. When Harry first saw his parents in it, they didn't appear as vague memories. They moved, smiled, and looked directly into his eyes. It wasn't illusion, it felt like presence. "They're not ghosts," Dumbledore warned him, but even he seemed uneasy. No one else ever saw the dead in that mirror. Ron saw glory, Hermione saw success, but Harry saw those who no longer belonged to the living. Perhaps his bond with death, the fragment of Voldemort's soul inside him, allowed him to see beyond the veil. Dumbledore removed the mirror not because it tempted students, but because it opened something that should remain closed. Later, when Harry used the resurrection stone in the forest, the figures of his parents appeared again, silent, gentle, and eerily similar to those from the mirror. The connection is too strong to ignore. The mirror may not just show desire, it may summon echoes from the other side. That's why Dumbledore hid it deep beneath the castle, because such magic, even born from love, touches the edge of forbidden power. Number 8. Ghosts are not just souls. Ghosts in the wizarding world are not what they seem. They aren't full souls drifting between life and death, but echoes, fragments of identity preserved by powerful magic. Nearly headless Nick once told Harry, "I was afraid of death. I chose to remain behind." That fear didn't stop his body from dying. It anchored a shadow of his spirit to the physical world. This explains why ghosts can interact with matter. Moaning Myrtle splashes in her bathroom, not because she lives, but because the magic of her violent death still lingers there. The place remembers her, and she remembers the place. Hogwarts is the perfect breeding ground for such echoes. The castle itself is steeped in ancient magic, its stones saturated with centuries of learning, emotion, and tragedy. Every corridor hums with residual energy. Every chamber carries memories of those who died within its walls. That's why Hogwarts hosts more ghosts than any other place in Britain. It amplifies them. The Bloody Baron's chains, the Fat Friar's laughter, the Grey Lady's sorrow, all are living memories woven into the castle's spellwork. They exist because Hogwarts refuses to forget. No Muggle leaves a ghost behind, not because they lack courage or will, but because they lack magic. Their essence fades into the natural order, while a wizard's energy can be caught, preserved like light in glass. In this sense, ghosts are not the dead at all, but the imprints of magic that once burned too brightly to vanish. They are reminders of how closely creation and destruction walk together in the wizarding world. Death may take the body, but where there is enough power and enough pain, the world itself remembers. Number 9. Dumbledore's wand held more than power. The Elder Wand was never a simple tool. It was a force of its own, ancient, restless, and hungry. Dumbledore called it a strange and troublesome friend, but even he never truly mastered it. The wand had passed through generations of wizards, each one falling to violence or betrayal. Antioch Peverell died for it. Grindelwald used it to wage war. And when Dumbledore claimed it after their duel in 1945, he believed he could break the cycle. "Perhaps I was fit to own it," he once told Harry, "because I knew how little it was worth." Yet over the years, the wand seemed to whisper otherwise. Dumbledore's wisdom deepened, but so did his detachment. He began to see life as a sequence of inevitable losses: Ariana, Grindelwald, the curse that was already killing him. The Elder Wand, bound to death itself, may have magnified that sense of distance. It was a wand that answered only to power, and it had chosen a man already burdened with guilt. Every spell cast with it carried a quiet echo of mortality. Even when he disarmed Voldemort's followers or saved lives, there was a chill in his mercy, as if the wand itself reminded him that all victories end the same way, in death. When Dumbledore asked Severus Snape to kill him, it was not cowardice or strategy. It was release. By dying willingly, he broke the wand's hold and denied it another murder. Like the ring in Tolkien's story, the Elder Wand could only be silenced through surrender. That's why, after Voldemort's fall, Harry chose to return it to Dumbledore's tomb. He understood what his mentor had learned too late. True mastery is not in power, but in letting go of it. And so, with one final act of humility, Dumbledore freed himself from the oldest curse of all, the desire to control death. Number 10. Why Neville matters. Neville Longbottom was never meant to be ordinary. The prophecy could have chosen him as easily as it chose Harry. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month dies, it said. Both boys fit the words. But Voldemort chose Harry, and that choice sealed his fate. He chose the boy he thought most like himself, Dumbledore later told Harry. It wasn't destiny that marked the scar on his forehead, it was Voldemort's fear. The Dark Lord saw in Harry a reflection of his own ambition, and by trying to destroy it, he gave it power. Neville, however, walked the same path in silence. His parents were broken by Bellatrix Lestrange, their minds trapped in St. Mungo's. He grew up in the shadow of loss, just as Harry did, yet his pain never became anger, it became courage. When others mocked him, he endured. When others faltered, he stood. His wand once trembled. Later, it struck with the same resolve that once burned in Lily Potter's heart. Neville's journey was slower, quieter, but just as heroic. When he drew the sword of Gryffindor from the sorting hat during the Battle of Hogwarts, he proved that bravery is not born, it's chosen. The sword appears only to those who show true Gryffindor courage. At that moment, he was not second to Harry, he was equal. He faced Voldemort's snake, Nagini, the final Horcrux, and cut it down, ending the last piece of the Dark Lord's soul. The prophecy had come full circle. One child ended Voldemort's life, the other destroyed what kept him alive. Two boys, one destiny, split by choice. It's easy to see why the hat almost placed Neville in Hufflepuff. Loyalty, humility, kindness, these traits defined him more than glory. Yet that same heart made him the true heir of Gryffindor's spirit. Where Harry mastered death, Neville mastered fear. And perhaps that's why magic itself honored them both. One defeated darkness through sacrifice, the other through courage. Voldemort never understood that his real battle was not with a prophecy, but with two reflections of the goodness he could never destroy. Number 11. The Phoenix and the Circle of Rebirth. Fawkes never appeared by accident. Every time the Phoenix showed himself, someone nearby was facing the edge of despair and the chance to be reborn. When he came to Harry in the Chamber of Secrets, the boy was dying. Poison from the basilisk's fang burned through his veins, and Voldemort's memory loomed over Ginny's body. Then Fawkes appeared in a burst of flame, tears falling onto Harry's wound. The healing wasn't just physical, it was a symbol. Pain can destroy, but it can also cleanse. Phoenix tears have healing powers, Dumbledore once explained, but what they truly healed that day was Harry's courage. Fawkes burned and rose again many times, but the real mystery lies in when he chose to appear. He wasn't always at Dumbledore's side. He was gone during moments of pride or manipulation, but returned whenever his master, or the school, needed redemption. After Dumbledore's death, Fawkes sang one last time over the castle, a song so full of grief that even the portraits fell silent. Then he vanished. Some said he left forever. Others believed he returned to the heart of Hogwarts, waiting for another soul worthy of rebirth. The connection between Fawkes and the castle runs deeper than loyalty. Hogwarts itself follows the same rhythm as the Phoenix, burning and rising, breaking and mending. Each generation brings destruction. The Chamber of Secrets opens, Death Eaters invade, walls fall. Yet the school always rebuilds. Fawkes's song, echoing through the halls, feels like the heartbeat of the castle. It reminds us that even in ruins, magic still breathes. The cycle never ends because it belongs to the very foundation of the wizarding world, the belief that light can rise again after darkness. Perhaps that's why Fawkes chose Dumbledore, not because of his power, but because of his guilt. The man who once sought glory learned humility through loss. Like the Phoenix, Dumbledore carried his own ashes, his sister's death, his mistakes, his secrets, and rose above them. Fawkes stayed by him until that lesson was complete. When Dumbledore fell, the phoenix sang not in farewell, but in recognition. The circle had closed, and somewhere, deep within Hogwarts, the flame of rebirth still waits to rise. Number 12. The dangerous harmony of the Deathly Hallows. Harry Potter never hunted the Deathly Hallows. They came to him, as if drawn by fate itself. The invisibility cloak was already his, passed down from his father, James Potter. It wasn't won through trickery or battle, but through love, a father's wish to protect his son. Later, the resurrection stone appeared inside the golden snitch Dumbledore left for him, activated only when Harry was ready to face death. And finally, the Elder Wand came into his possession, not by killing its previous owner, but because he had disarmed Draco Malfoy, the wand's true master. Every owner before Harry met a violent end. Antioch Peverell was murdered in his sleep for the Elder Wand. Cadmus took his own life after calling back the woman he loved. Even Ignotus, who hid from death, eventually gave up his cloak to his son and met his end willingly. Harry repeated Ignotus's final act, but with one crucial difference. He faced death not with resignation, but with mercy. "Does it hurt?" he asked, before walking into the forest, knowing he would not return. He didn't fight for power or immortality. He accepted the inevitability of life's end. That's what made him different. When Harry met Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest, he carried all three Hallows. Yet, he didn't use them. He didn't try to overpower his enemy or escape fate. Instead, he dropped the Resurrection Stone, let the Elder Wand rest, and returned the cloak to its ordinary use. By giving up what others had killed for, he broke the curse that had haunted the Peverell brothers. "I meant to, Harry," Dumbledore once confessed, "but I was such a fool." Harry succeeded where even Dumbledore failed. He mastered death by not fearing it. In that moment, death lost its hold on him. Voldemort, who sought to dominate it, became its servant. Harry, who embraced it, became free. When he stood again after the killing curse, it wasn't magic that saved him. It was choice. The Deathly Hallows no longer demanded blood. They were finally at peace, because their last owner was not a conqueror, but a man who understood that true power lies in letting go. Number 13. The living magic of Hogwarts. Hogwarts is not a mere backdrop, not simply stone and mortar enchanted to stand proud in a Highland glen. It is far more intimate. It is alive. The magic woven by Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin left more than architecture. They seeded instincts. Within the castle's walls slumbers a consciousness, faint yet vigilant, attuned to its inhabitants, responsive to their intentions. The shifting staircases, vanishing corridors, hidden chambers, these are not whimsical enchantments alone. They are the reflexes of a creature of magic, protecting its own, rejecting the malignant. In this living edifice lies a hidden detail few acknowledge. Hogwarts magic is sustained by memory, by loyalty, and by the enduring will of its founders. Consider the ever-changing staircase, the one that turns a student heading toward the library one day but obstructs that same path the next. Is that merely idle enchantment? Or is it a subtle mood, the castle sensing who moves through its halls and gauging their purpose? Those staircases seem to remember past trespasses, past threats, past deeds. When Severus Snape once led Draco Malfoy into the dungeons on an errand, the stair he ascended refused to take him up. He was forced around via a less direct route, as though Hogwarts would not grant him easy passage. That is instinct, castle instinct, the structure responding to the scent of unease. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Dumbledore remarks, "Help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it," which hints at the castle's disposition to favour those it deems worthy. But the castle's life is rooted deeper in the heart of the founders. Imagine the four of them standing in a plain void before the castle's plan, each weaving their strongest spells, each staking their legacies. Gryffindor demanded courage and valor, Slytherin foresaw secrecy and ambition, Ravenclaw prized wisdom and insight, Hufflepuff nurtured loyalty and fairness. These four threads, woven into walls and halls, are not always harmonious. Their contradictions echo in Hogwarts' interior politics, the lingering presence of the Chamber of Secrets, the peculiarly manifested Gryffindor's sword. The castle holds memory of every compromise, every rivalry, every hidden agenda. When Tom Riddle reopened the chamber, he revived long-held grudge lodged within the stone itself. That the chamber lay hidden for centuries, opening only under a true heir of Slytherin, implies that the castle guards that secret in its very core. For instance, the Forbidden Forest sometimes shifts its paths, blocking one approach while opening another. On one spring evening, Hermione Granger attempted to cut across via a familiar animal trail to reach Hagrid's hut, but found dense thorns that had not been there moments before. It was as though the forest part of Hogwarts' domain recognized her purpose, or suspected danger, and altered itself to guide or mislead. That is not random magic, that is response. The corridors and grounds are extensions of the castle's senses. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, when Harry whispered Parseltongue to open the entrance to the chamber, the stone walls obeyed. "Open up," he muttered. "Open up." The walls slid aside. Only a voice in the language of snakes could trigger that door. That unspoken accord is more than spell work. Stone attuning itself to legacy, to language, to heritage. The castle knows Slytherin's bloodline enough to respond. That is instinct, memory in motion. On the other hand, the sword of Gryffindor appears only to those who are worthy, as Dumbledore says, or as Neville Longbottom later proves. The castle must itself sense that worthiness, for the sword lies in a basin, coated in a substance no ordinary hand could reach. When Neville proved true at the Battle of Hogwarts, the sword appeared for him, rather than manifesting simply by schedule or prophecy. That sudden materialization is more than magic. It is the castle aligning with the spirit of Gryffindor, reacting to intent. The castle, alive, knows who is worthy. In the days following Voldemort's return, Hogwarts showed a defensive posture. The walls shuddered when Death Eaters approached. Doors slammed shut, ledges collapsed, secret panels blocked approaches. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when Draco attempted to allow Death Eaters into the castle, the Vanishing Cabinets failed or misbehaved. Hogwarts resisted the intrusion, as though it judged the threat and actively shielded its students. That resistance is instinct at work, as if the castle heartbeat quickened when danger loomed. Even portraits participate, not merely painted likenesses, but semi-sentient memories. The portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black once whispered warnings to Dumbledore's portrait. It intruded into the hallways, sending messages between rooms. These portraits act as extensions of castle memory, guardians of secrets. The castle, alive, keeps its own archive and relays that archive when it wills. The voices behind the frames are echoes, but echoes alive with purpose. One evening in potions class, the cauldron room's floor shifted subtly under Snape's cauldron stand. His hand movements wavered. Later analysis showed a faint tremor in the flagstones. No student noticed, but the room itself quivered. Displeasure, fear, defiance. The castle was testing him. The very foundations responded to emotional tension. That trembling is instinct, not malfunction. The room of requirement is a living locus of need. It reveals itself only when someone is truly in desperate need, and then adapts to furnish the precise object or environment desired. If a student needs to hide, it becomes a hidden chamber. If healing, it becomes a clinic. If prep space, it becomes a training area. That elasticity is more than powerful charm. It is a transformation, a reactive being. Within Hogwarts, the castle listens to need and responds. That is alive. Number 14, Lupin's smile. Of all the faces that passed through the corridors of Hogwarts, few carried such quiet strength as Remus Lupin's. His smile, that faint, almost apologetic curve of the lips, always seemed like a moment of sunlight piercing through grey clouds. But the more one looks at it, the more haunting it becomes. Lupin's smile is not one of light-hearted joy or careless ease. It is the calm of someone who has already walked through fire and learned not to flinch at the flames. His smile is a shield, not to protect himself from mockery or pity, but to protect others from seeing the weight he carries. When Lupin first appeared in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, asleep in the train compartment with the storm raging outside, that faint smile was already there. He was exhausted, poorly dressed, and yet, when he awoke to the sight of 3 frightened children and a Dementor hovering at the door, his reaction wasn't fear or panic. It was a soft, almost sad smile. Rowling describes him as looking tired but kind. He didn't raise his voice, didn't boast. He simply conjured a Patronus with quiet precision, driving the creature away. Then, without ceremony, he handed Harry a piece of chocolate and smiled again, gentle, weary, and reassuring. That was the first moment the reader saw the essence of Lupin's character. He smiled not because the danger had passed, but because he knew that the children needed calm, not more fear. That smile would appear again and again throughout the series, always at the edge of peril. When he taught defense against the dark arts, his classroom was a rare sanctuary for students. They loved him because he respected them, because he understood fear. "You fear fear itself," he once told Neville Longbottom, after helping him face the boggart that turned into Professor Snape. When Neville succeeded, Lupin smiled broadly, not in triumph for himself, but in pride for the boy. The moment glowed with warmth, but there was something behind it too, a trace of melancholy, as if Lupin was remembering what it felt like to overcome his own fears as a young man. His smile here was not a teacher's casual encouragement. It was a survivor's gesture, a way of telling Neville, "You can do this, I've done this too." Lupin's smile has layers. It was shaped by years of rejection. The wolf bite he received as a child marked him not only physically, but socially. In Order of the Phoenix, he admits to Harry that he was bitten as a small boy, and that his condition made his parents despair. He learned early to hide his pain behind gentleness. Dumbledore's compassion, allowing him into Hogwarts, gave him a fragile place in the world, but not without fear. The other students never knew, not until much later. His smile became a mask of normalcy, the only armor he could wear in a world that saw him as dangerous. Every time he smiled in the series, it was a small rebellion against that stigma, a statement that his soul was still his own. There's a moment after he helps Harry and his friends escape from the shrieking shack when Lupin's smile turns almost tragic. He discovers that Sirius Black is innocent, that Peter Pettigrew is alive, and for a brief, shining instant, he smiles with genuine hope. After years of isolation, he has his friend back. But as soon as the moon rises, that same smile fades into grim acceptance. The werewolf takes over, the curse reminding him that peace will never last. The contrast is brutal. A few hours earlier, he was laughing softly with Sirius and Harry. Now he's a beast, hunted and feared again. That fragile smile, so human and warm, stands as a symbol of the boundary between man and monster, the last trace of Remus before the darkness swallows him. In The Half-Blood Prince, Lupin's smile becomes rarer, more hesitant. By then, the war has returned, and he carries its weight like an invisible chain. When he visits the burrow, Tonks watches him with worried eyes. He avoids her gaze and offers his usual mild smile, the kind that hides far more than it reveals. His humility and restraint make him beloved by readers, but also profoundly tragic. He doesn't believe he deserves happiness, that a werewolf has any right to love. Even when Tonks confesses her feelings, Lupin smiles, instead of answering, as if the very idea of being loved is too painful to confront. His smile in that moment is both gratitude and surrender. He's thankful, but he doesn't dare hope. When he finally marries Tonks, his smile shifts again. It becomes softer, but also haunted by guilt. "I am too old, too poor, too dangerous," he tells Harry later in Deathly Hallows, when he confesses he tried to leave his pregnant wife to join the trio on their mission. It's a shocking confession, but it reveals how deep his self-loathing runs. Even then, Lupin uses a faint, forced smile when he tries to justify himself, as if to convince Harry that it's all under control. But Harry sees through it. He calls Lupin a coward, and that moment shatters the mask. The smile disappears, replaced by raw anger and shame. Yet it's precisely in that scene that Lupin's humanity becomes undeniable. His smile, usually calm and kind, fails him here, and that failure is what makes him real. Number 15. Why Dementors Loved Harry. Harry Potter's encounters with Dementors are woven into the narrative as trials of despair and anguish. Yet beneath that surface lies a darker, subtler current. Perhaps it was not merely his traumatic past that drew the Dementors to Harry, but something far more arcane and primal. The canonical explanation that Harry had the worst memories, that his childhood was unbearably painful, is certainly true, but it may be only the visible shell of a far deeper magnetism. What if Dementors sensed in Harry something more than fear, something they could feed on, something vitally connected to death and darkness itself? From their first appearance, Dementors are described as creatures that drain peace, hope, and happiness. Get too near a Dementor and every good feeling, every happy memory will be sucked out of you. But they do not simply neutralize the positive, they accentuate the negative. They force their victims to relive their worst memories. In Harry's case, those worst memories are more intense, more crushing than for almost anyone else. We are told, through Dumbledore and others, that Harry's suffering was enormous, and that he carried terrible losses before he was ever aware of the wizarding world. But could there be an additional secret reason, a hidden detail, that makes Harry uniquely susceptible, uniquely attractive to Dementors? We know that a fragment of Voldemort's soul latched onto Harry the night that Voldemort's killing curse rebounded, making Harry an unintentional Horcrux. That fragment conferred odd side effects. It allowed Harry occasional glimpses into Voldemort's mind, created their psychic link, caused him pain in his scar when Voldemort was strong or feeling emotion. And it may have done more, embedding within Harry a subtle trace of death, a resonant echo of the Dark Lord's own tortured consciousness. Dementors, as ancient beings tied to death, despair, and the void, might not merely feed on fear, but instinctively sense the presence of death's echo. In Harry, they found not just trauma, but a living conduit to darkness itself. Imagine the Dementors gliding across the cold night, drawn like moths to a deeper resonance. They sense not only pain, but the residue of Voldemort's broken soul fragment. Where others carry sorrow, Harry carries a spectral signature, the mark of a shattered and malevolent being. To the Dementors, he is more than prey. He is a well of darkness, a bridge to the abyss. Their presence amplifies his despair, not merely because of what he remembers, but because they are touching something in him that is not just human memory, but a lurking shard of mortality and evil. This hidden detail reframes several canonical scenes. In Prisoner of Azkaban, during the Dementor attack on the Hogwarts Express, Harry collapses and sinks deeper into cold and hopeless despair, much more than his companions. His reaction is more extreme. The narrative describes how he hears every footstep in his memory, sees every dark corner. The others feel dread, but Harry feels suffocation. The canonical explanation is that he's more sensitive, more wounded. But we can also read that the Dementors are reacting to more. They are resonating with the part of him that is not purely human, that echoes the Dark Lord. Later, in Order of the Phoenix, when Dementors patrol Hogwarts, Harry again is isolated by their presence. Students and teachers feel unease, but Harry feels crushing weight, memories rising. Even as he trains in Patronus with Lupin, his experiences stand out. His Patronus is powerful, a stag, but he still struggles. One could interpret that his internal struggle is not merely with fear or sadness, but with a mingled dark echo. Because the Dementors are drawn to him, his imperative is not merely to resist their emotional drain, but to resist the pull of that dark fragment itself. Consider also his connection to Voldemort. When Voldemort is strong, when he feels powerful, Harry's scar hurts. That indicates the fragment within Harry is reactive, alive in some sense. That piece of soul is not passive. It resonates with Voldemort's moods, with events in the magical world. If Dementors detect those resonances, fluctuations, dark energy, they would be drawn to him like detectors to a hidden ley line. Harry, in effect, becomes a magical magnet for darkness. We also see that Dementors have allegiance only insofar as feeding or compulsion. They can shift sides, serving the Ministry guarding Azkaban, later aligning with Voldemort. Their loyalty is fickle, fluid. What they seek is not justice or ideology, but feeding. They gravitate toward the sources of despair and death. If Harry harbors a fragment of the Dark Lord's soul, then he represents a deep, sustained source of the kind of dark food they covet. It is no wonder that, in proximity to Harry, their effects intensify, their drain increases. An illustrative example. When Harry goes to the Ministry in Order of the Phoenix, he and his friends are confronted by Dementors summoned by Dolores Umbridge. Harry draws forth his Patronus, but the narrative stresses how much more acutely his internal sensations are. He feels himself sliding, the memories and darkness rising. His flinch is greater. The mere presence of Dementors at the Ministry, so close to a site of traumatic exposure, Sirius's death, Ministry conspiracies, creates a feedback loop. Harry's suppressed memories, his internal echo of Voldemort, the Dementors' pull, all coincide into a moment of high tension. The canonical fight is about defense and fear, but beneath it, the hidden detail is that Harry's very soul is being tugged. Number 16. Magic and Technology, Two Worlds at War. The world of Harry Potter hides an invisible border most readers never notice. The quiet, almost sacred separation between magic and technology. At first glance, it seems like a simple quirk of the wizarding world. Electricity and magic don't mix, Arthur Weasley once explained with fascination as he poked at a battery-powered device. But the deeper truth behind this is far more unsettling. It's not just about interference, it's about conflict, a clash between two opposing forces that define the human condition itself. Technology is the art of control, of numbers, of predictability. Magic is the art of surrender, of intuition, of chaos. And Hogwarts, that timeless fortress in the Scottish Highlands, stands like a cathedral built to protect one from the other. When Hermione Granger tries to apply logic to divination, she fails not because she lacks intelligence, but because she represents the intrusion of reason into a space that feeds on faith. Professor Trelawney tells her that the inner eye does not see upon command, and in that one sentence lies the essence of why technology cannot coexist with magic. Machines operate on command. Magic awakens through emotion. Hermione's charts and calculations, her endless desire to quantify, are the very things that silence the deeper, irrational pulse of magic. It's why she feels uncomfortable in Trelawney's perfumed tower, surrounded by floating orbs and whispering teacups. The air itself rejects the analytical mind. In contrast, Harry thrives there, even without understanding. His power does not come from books or formulae, but from instinct. When he produces a Patronus, Lupin tells him to think of something happy, not to visualize the trajectory of his wand or the angle of his stance. Expecto Patronum is not about technique, it's about emotion. The moment you try to control it, it dies. The moment you feel it, it lives. This is the same principle that repels technology, because where there is emotion, there is unpredictability. And where there is unpredictability, no machine can function. Hogwarts itself seems to reject modernity. There are no lights, no computers, no telephones. The castle hums with the pulse of an older kind of order, the kind that flows through paintings that breathe and staircases that move on their own accord. When Arthur Weasley enchants a Ford Anglia to fly, he violates a fundamental rule of that equilibrium. The car, a symbol of control, begins to act of its own will once it enters the magical realm. It becomes wild. It runs into the forbidden forest and refuses to be mastered again. That moment is not just comic relief. It's a message. Technology, once touched by magic, ceases to be technology. It gains a soul, and in doing so, loses obedience. There's a reason no one in the wizarding world has ever invented a magical equivalent of the computer. The very act of categorizing, measuring, or recording magic destroys its fluid nature. Even the Ministry of Magic, for all its bureaucracy, relies on quills and parchment, not circuits and screens. Their records float in enchanted cabinets, where files whisper and reshuffle themselves. A computer would demand static truth, a database of facts. Magic laughs at facts. It thrives on contradiction. A spell that works for one wizard may fail for another. Love potions fade when true affection appears. The room of requirement changes shape based on need. How can such a world ever coexist with one where buttons replace belief? In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore shows Harry a memory, a captured moment stored in a pensieve. The pensieve itself is a paradoxical object. It stores memory, much like a hard drive, but it is alive. The silvery strands swirl and shimmer, responding to thought and intention. A Muggle scientist might call it a biological interface, but in truth, it's something deeper. It's emotion, made tangible. Try to explain it with data, and the substance would vanish. The pensieve reveals that even the wizarding world's closest thing to technology still demands faith. You must trust it. You must feel it. Consider the Marauder's map. To open it, one must whisper, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." The phrase itself is emotional, mischievous, almost sacred. A password, yes, but also a confession. The map does not respond to logic. It responds to identity. Fred and George could use it because their very nature resonated with its intent. Filch could never unlock it, no matter how many times he repeated the words, because his soul did not match the map's emotional frequency. Imagine if the map were a piece of modern technology, a tablet, a GPS tracker. It would require only input, not spirit. But magic demands something technology cannot give: complicity of the heart. Throughout the series, every attempt to systematize magic collapses under its own weight. Dolores Umbridge, armed with ministry-approved textbooks and government regulations, tries to teach defense against the dark arts without performing spells. Her classroom becomes lifeless, sterile, and powerless. Harry's rebellion is not just against her cruelty, but against her philosophy. When he forms Dumbledore's army, He brings magic back to its essence: emotion, practice, and shared belief. Every great wizard in history has started out as nothing more than what we are now. Students, he says. If they can do it, why not us? It's a declaration of faith, not knowledge. Voldemort, on the other hand, embodies the ultimate technological mindset. He seeks control, precision, immortality, a perfect, repeatable formula for life. His Horcruxes are his machines, mechanical extensions of his being, each designed to ensure predictability in a world ruled by chance. Yet every one of them brings him closer to ruin. He loses touch with humanity, and thus with magic itself. His spells are powerful, but cold. His knowledge vast, but hollow. Dumbledore's words echo the truth. It was your heart that saved you. Magic obeys emotion, not intellect, and Voldemort's failure proves that the quest for total control, the essence of technology, is death to the soul of magic. There's something symbolic in the way Muggles hide behind walls of screens while wizards communicate through fire and owls. The owl carries emotion. It knows its owner, feels loyalty. The fire that connects two distant hearths responds to voice and presence, not data packets. When Sirius appears in the Gryffindor common room flames, the moment feels alive, dangerous, intimate. There's warmth in it. Something no hologram or video call could ever replicate. That warmth is precisely what electricity cannot bear. Emotion generates interference. Even the Forbidden Forest reflects this opposition. It's a space untouched by civilization, wild, ancient, and irrational. Centaurs read the stars, but refuse to predict the future with certainty. Mars is bright tonight, they say, acknowledging patterns without imposing meaning. They represent the opposite of science's arrogance. They observe, but they do not dissect. It's no wonder that Muggle devices would fail under that canopy. The forest does not permit control, it demands reverence. The train that takes students to Hogwarts, the Hogwarts Express, is perhaps the only piece of technology that crosses into the magical realm. But notice how it operates. It leaves from platform 9 3/4, a place that does not exist within logic. To reach it, one must run through a solid wall. The act of faith is the ticket. Once aboard, the train becomes something else entirely, a liminal space where the rational world fades and the magical one begins. It's technology baptized by belief. This invisible barrier between logic and wonder is the thread that runs through Harry's entire journey. His upbringing in the Dursleys' sterile, over-controlled household mirrors the Muggle obsession with order. Vernon Dursley's world is full of drills, schedules, and numbers. Perfectly normal, thank you very much. Magic, to him, is chaos, a threat to his comfortable predictability. But to Harry, it's liberation. Every spell, every apparition, every Quidditch match breaks a chain of logic. The broomstick refuses the laws of physics. The snitch moves with a will of its own. These are rebellions against control. It's fascinating to notice that whenever a magical object imitates Muggle technology, it does so imperfectly, even comically. The extendable ears from Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, the Flu Network, the Howlers, all of them work through human emotion rather than mechanical precision. The Howler screams because someone is angry, not because a wire transmits sound. The Flu Network malfunctions when one speaks incorrectly, not when a circuit fails. There's always a reminder. You cannot separate magic from emotion without breaking it. When Hermione uses a time turner, she does not simply travel in time as one would in a machine. The hourglass around her neck glows softly, bound not by gears, but by understanding. Professor McGonagall's warning is clear. Serious harm can be caused by tampering with time. In other words, logic has limits here. You cannot dissect time with equations. The time turner works because the user respects the fragility of reality. There's no engine, no switch, only trust. This is why magic disappears, where curiosity turns into calculation. The Ministry's Department of Mysteries, for example, studies the forces that hold the world together, yet even its unspeakables cannot fully explain what they observe. The Hall of Prophecy contains thousands of glass orbs, but they shatter at a touch, releasing whispers of future that cannot be recorded. Prophecy resists storage. Knowledge destroys it. In that room, the tension between technology and magic becomes almost physical. Glowing glass spheres, perfectly aligned, containing truths that disintegrate the moment they are measured. Dumbledore understood this divide better than anyone. His fascination with alchemy, especially his partnership with Nicholas Flamel, was not a pursuit of science, but of harmony. Alchemy, in its true form, is the meeting point between faith and understanding. The philosopher's stone is not a machine. It is a mirror of the soul. It grants eternal life only to those who do not crave control. When Voldemort seeks it, it hides from him. When Flamel holds it, it hums peacefully. Again, magic demands purity of intention, not mastery of design. There's a haunting beauty in how the magical world continues to evolve without ever embracing technology. The Daily Prophet prints on enchanted paper that rearranges itself. Portraits gossip across frames. Even Quidditch, the sport of flight, refuses modernization. There are no metal detectors, no headsets, no drones. The brooms are made of wood and twine, and yet they carry more grace than any aircraft. The broom listens to its rider. The Nimbus 2000 responds to Harry's confidence, not to a button press. It's not built, it's grown, shaped by hand and feeling. When the final battle erupts at Hogwarts, the contrast between the two worlds reaches its climax. Outside, Muggles live by news broadcasts and satellites. Inside, spells crackle through ancient stone corridors. The castle itself fights back, awakening statues and suits of armor. The very walls, infused with centuries of emotion, become sentient defenders. Technology could never do this. No circuit could hold that much memory. No steel could feel loyalty. The battle proves that magic, for all its chaos, is the deeper truth, because it lives, breathes, and remembers. The truth hidden beneath J.K. Rowling's universe is that magic begins where measurement ends. Every wand movement, every whisper of a spell, every flicker of light from a wand tip is an act of faith, not science. As Hermione once said, fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself. And in that sentence lies the core of this hidden law. To name is to control, to fear is to feel. Magic lives in the second, dies in the first. The wizarding world survives precisely because it resists being understood. The more Muggles map the stars, the more wizards gaze at them and listen. The more machines hum, the more wands hum back. With defiance. Somewhere deep in the forbidden forest, beneath the whispering branches and the silver glow of centaur eyes, lies the truth. The day magic allows itself to be measured will be the day it disappears. Hogwarts will fade not because people stop believing in it, but because they start explaining it. And perhaps that is the real reason Dumbledore smiled when he said, "Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean it's not real?" Number 17. House Elves, the mirror of the wizarding world. Of all the creatures that inhabit the wizarding world, few are as misunderstood as the house elves. They shuffle in the shadows of great halls, polishing silver, scrubbing cauldrons, ironing robes, and yet, behind their large, tearful eyes, lies one of the darkest mirrors of magical society. For all their talk of bravery, justice, and equality, wizards have built their world upon an unspoken hierarchy where the freedom of one race depends on the servitude of another. It is a contradiction so deep that even Albus Dumbledore, the man who championed compassion above all, lived comfortably in a castle maintained by invisible hands that were never invited to sit at the table. When Dobby first appeared in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, he seemed almost comical, a creature with a squeaky voice, bulging eyes, and a nervous habit of punishing himself. Readers laughed when he banged his head against the wall or shut his ears in an oven door, but beneath that absurdity hid the mind of a being who had been broken. "Dobby is used to death threats, sir. Dobby gets them 5 times a day at home," he confessed, and in that one line lay the entire tragedy of his existence. Dobby's servitude to the Malfoy family was not merely a job, it was bondage, inherited through generations, normalized to the point where even the victim found comfort in his chains. The wizards, who prided themselves on enlightenment and moral superiority to muggles, failed to recognize the horror of this arrangement. Lucius Malfoy's treatment of Dobby was cruel, yes, but it was not unique. Every pure-blood family owned elves, and even those considered good rarely questioned the system. The Weasleys, beloved for their kindness, never liberated their elf. Hogwarts itself relied on dozens of unseen elves to feed hundreds of students every day. "House elves are delighted to do what they do," Dumbledore once said, a statement as chilling as it was gentle. It was the same justification used by every benevolent master throughout history, that the servant enjoys serving. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, J.K. Rowling finally lifted the curtain on this hidden world when Harry discovered the kitchens of Hogwarts. There, he saw an army of elves bustling about, smiling, laughing, and bowing with genuine affection. "We is happy, Harry Potter, sir," said Winky's trembling voice. "We is happy to serve." It was impossible to tell whether that happiness was genuine or a learned response to centuries of conditioning. They did not complain because they did not know how to imagine life otherwise. Their magic, immense and mysterious, was devoted entirely to the service of others. Wizards, who spent lifetimes mastering spells, had never considered that these small beings wielded a form of power that surpassed their own, and yet they kept them confined to kitchens and cellars, forbidden to use their full strength unless commanded. Winky's story illustrated the heart of this tragedy. Once a devoted servant of the Crouch family, she was cast out because her master's reputation was threatened. "Winky is disgraced," she cried, drowning her grief in butterbeer. Freedom, the supposed ideal of every moral society, destroyed her. Without someone to serve, she lost her identity. She did not understand that she was more than her obedience. The wizards, in granting her freedom, had stripped her of meaning. What made the scene haunting was not her humiliation, but her love. She loved those who enslaved her. That love was not born of compulsion. It was the product of centuries of cultural design. The elves did not need chains because they carried their servitude in their hearts. Hermione Granger saw this injustice and tried to change it. Her creation of SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, was noble, but tragically naive. She believed that freedom meant giving elves clothes, that equality could be written on parchment and distributed like pamphlets. "You know, house elves get a salary and holidays now," she told Ron proudly, in the Goblet of Fire. But she could not understand that Dobby's happiness was an anomaly. Dobby was different because he wanted freedom, because he had tasted cruelty so severe that liberty became his only salvation. The others did not share his vision. They looked at Hermione's knitted hats with confusion or fear, hiding from her gifts as if they were curses. To them, freedom was not liberation, it was exile. Dobby's journey from servitude to self-determination remains one of the most profound arcs in the entire series. When Lucius Malfoy unwittingly handed him a sock, Dobby's trembling fingers closed not around a piece of cloth, but around the symbol of awakening. His joy was childlike, but his words were ancient. Dobby is free. Yet even in freedom, he continued to serve. He risked his life to save Harry, never once asking for reward. His final act, dying with Harry Potter's name on his lips, was not an act of obedience, but of love, freely chosen. It is perhaps the only moment in the series when servitude transforms into genuine devotion. The tragedy, however, is that such love could only exist once Dobby had suffered enough to desire freedom. The house elves' magic stands as a silent rebuke to wizardkind. Their power is effortless and instinctual. They can apparate inside Hogwarts, a feat no wizard can achieve. They can perform enchantments without wands, undo curses, and create food from thin air, something the laws of magical physics declare impossible. House elves have their own brand of magic, Dumbledore explained, yet he never sought to understand it. Why would he? To acknowledge the full potential of house elves would mean confronting the uncomfortable truth that wizards are not the pinnacle of magical evolution. They are merely the dominant class. The elves' magic is primal, untainted by human ego, but that purity is precisely why wizards fear it. By binding elves through servitude, they ensure that such power never challenges their authority.
The relationship between wizards and elves mirrors the darker patterns of history, the kind of hypocrisy that allows a society to fight for justice while perpetuating inequality within its own walls. The Order of the Phoenix battled Voldemort for the sake of freedom, yet their headquarters in Grimmauld Place was tended by Kreacher, a house elf who muttered racial slurs about blood traitors under his breath. His hatred was not his own. It was inherited from his masters, from generations of indoctrination that taught him to despise those who treated him kindly. Sirius Black, though he despised his family's cruelty, could not bring himself to treat Kreacher with respect. "Get out, Kreacher!" he would shout. And when Kreacher betrayed him, it was not malice but confusion. He had simply followed the moral compass his masters had given him. In Kreacher's redemption lies the cruel paradox of the elves. When Harry inherited him, he did something no wizard had done before. He showed him kindness. "Kreacher, I want you to find Mundungus Fletcher," he ordered, but added, "please." That single word, please, was a spell more powerful than any charm. Slowly, Kreacher changed. He began to take pride in serving Harry, not because he was compelled to, but because he wanted to. Yet even this transformation raises a question. Was it freedom, or was it a gentler kind of bondage? The elf still lived to serve. He simply served a master who treated him better. The structure remained unchanged. Wizards could be kind or cruel, but they could not imagine a world without servants. There is something unsettlingly theological in the way house elves view their existence. Their devotion to their masters resembles faith. They see obedience as sacred, rebellion as sin. When Winky was freed, she wept as though excommunicated. "Winky is not liking clothes," she said miserably, clutching her ragged tea towel. It is a mirror held up to the wizarding soul, a reminder that even those who believe themselves moral often depend on invisible suffering. The elves' magic, bound by loyalty, becomes a metaphor for all the quiet powers humanity suppresses in the name of order. Dumbledore once said, "You fail to recognize that it matters not what someone is born, but what they grow to be." Yet in the world he governed, entire species were denied the right to grow. The centaurs were exiled to forests, the goblins confined to banks, and the house elves, those patient spirits of domestic toil, were hidden in basements. Wizards defined equality only among themselves. The irony is breathtaking. The same people who condemned Voldemort for his obsession with blood purity tolerated a system built on magical purity. They saw the enslavement of elves not as evil, but as tradition. The system endured because it was convenient. Hermione's crusade, though mocked, reveals something crucial about the human heart, our inability to help others without reshaping them in our own image. She wanted to free the elves, but she never asked them what they wanted. Her compassion became another form of control. "They don't want clothes, Hermione,"
Ron told her, exasperated.
He was right, but not in the way he thought. The elves did not want freedom because they had been denied the imagination to conceive it. Their servitude was both prison and identity. To release them without giving them purpose was to cast them into the void. Dobby's death in the Deathly Hallows serves as the emotional climax of this moral contradiction. As he dies in Harry's arms, the boy whispers, "Here lies Dobby, a free elf." It is one of the few epitaphs in literature that feels both triumphant and unbearable. Freedom cost him his life, and yet it was the only way he could be truly alive. The wizards who attended his burial did not seem to grasp the depth of what had just occurred. A being once created to serve had achieved a form of spiritual transcendence. In his sacrifice, Dobby proved that love could exist outside of hierarchy. But his story also asks whether such transcendence is possible for all his kind, or whether freedom, for most elves, would remain a death sentence. The elves' subservience also reflects a profound psychological dependency. They derive meaning not from power, but from usefulness. In that sense, they are a reflection of the wizards themselves. Every witch and wizard defines their worth through their ability to control, to master, to influence. The Ministry of Magic, the schools, the bloodlines, all function through hierarchies. The elves simply embody that same obsession in its purest form. They are the mirror the wizards refuse to look into, because in their eager servitude, one can see the human hunger for purpose, even when that purpose requires surrender. If one looks closer, the elves' situation echoes the oldest myths. In ancient times, divine beings were said to bind lesser spirits to serve mortals, genies, familiars, guardian sprites. Power was always accompanied by dependency. The more potent the creature, the greater the restriction placed upon it. The same pattern repeats in the wizarding world. The elves' magic surpasses human understanding precisely because it is innocent of ambition. But by binding them, wizards have transformed that innocence into subservience. They have turned gods into butlers. Creature's small redemption arc shows that even the most broken servants can find meaning through compassion, but it also exposes the limits of that redemption. When he led the charge against the Death Eaters at the Battle of Hogwarts, shouting, "Fight, fight for my master, Regulus Black," it was a heartbreaking moment of loyalty. Yet it was also a reminder that his entire identity still revolved around servitude. His heroism was beautiful, but tragic, a final confirmation that even in rebellion, the elf could not escape the role of servant. His freedom came only through obedience to a different ideal. What makes the house elves so haunting is their sincerity. They are not bitter. They do not plot revenge. They love with a purity that wizards can neither understand nor deserve. When Dobby saved Harry and his friends from Malfoy Manor, he did not hesitate. "Dobby has come to rescue Harry Potter and his friends," he cried, his voice trembling with pride. That moment, though brief, revealed the terrifying beauty of unconditional devotion. He died not because he was ordered to, but because his heart demanded it. The elves' tragedy lies in this paradox. Their enslavement is moral corruption, yet their love is divine. Even after Voldemort's fall, the wizarding world showed no sign of addressing this moral wound. The epilogue of the series mentions no reforms, no recognition of the elves' role in the war. Their sacrifice remains invisible. Perhaps that is the author's final lesson, that injustice often survives victory. Wizards rebuilt their world, but the kitchens of Hogwarts still echoed with the quiet clatter of unseen hands. The cycle continued because it was easier to ignore than to confront. The true darkness of the magical world does not come from dark lords, but from the small, polite evils everyone agrees to overlook. The house elves, then, are not side characters. They are the soul of the series, the silent witnesses to wizardkind's hypocrisy, the living embodiment of the idea that power and kindness rarely coexist. Dobby's freedom, Winky's despair, Creature's confusion, each represents a facet of the same truth, that dependence and domination can masquerade as love. The elves are not bound by curses, but by meaning. They exist to serve, and when that purpose is taken away, they fade. In that sense, they are reflections not only of wizards, but of humanity itself, forever trapped between the yearning for freedom and the fear of what freedom truly demands. Number 18. Time flows differently in Hogwarts. Year after year, the first years cross the threshold of the great oak doors and breathe in the same dusty smell of parchment, stone, and ancient magic. They climb the same spiral staircases, stare at the same moving portraits, and gather in the same hall of Hogwarts, the candles flickering overhead as shadows dance across cold flagstones. Then, by the time the 7th year draws to a close, they depart into a world forever changed. Yet Hogwarts remains exactly where it was, exactly as it was. The castle never seems to age. The halls remember you, but do not grow older with you. This uncanny permanence hints at a secret no one speaks of. Time at Hogwarts flows not in a straight line, but in a circle. If one imagines time as a river, Hogwarts is not downstream, but circling back into its own waters. Each academic year resets the stage. New students fill familiar dormitories. New defense against the dark arts professors take the podium. New threats emerge in the corridors, and the cycle begins again. The ghosts glide through the same corridors, nearly headless. Nick drifts in the corridors of Gryffindor Tower. The fat lady returns to her portrait frame, and the Sorting Hat sings its old songs. Things change. Yes, faces change, secrets shift, but the skeleton of Hogwarts stands unmoved. The pattern suggests a temporal loop held in place by forces beyond mortal reckoning, perhaps sanctified by the founders themselves. This looping time, if it exists, offers a worldview in which Hogwarts is less a stationary castle than a living chronomorph, a being trapped in perpetual lesson and rehearsal. The founders, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin, might have woven into its bones a spell, a binding enchantment, to preserve their citadel not just against decay, but against the slip and dislocation of temporal erosion. In this view, every generation of students is but a rehearsal cast. Each Harry, each Hermione, each Dumbledore is merely the lead in the same play, cast anew with small improvisations. The war with Voldemort repeats, the Chamber of Secrets opens, the Tri-Wizard Tournament returns, or could, and the pattern echoes, because Hogwarts will not let itself die. But neither will it let itself move forward. The consistency of events supports this reading. Year after year, we see a new Data professor, Quirrell, Lockhart, Lupin, Moody, or Barty Crouch Jr., Umbridge, Snape, and finally Amicus Carrow. The position is cursed, according to canon, but in a temporal loop, this curse becomes necessary. The school cannot evolve, so someone must always fail or be replaced. Likewise, Hogwarts repeatedly opens and closes the Chamber of Secrets. A basilisk threatens the students more than once. The pattern is not random, it is structural. A cycle demands return. Thus, the recurring catastrophes, the return of the Dark Lord, attacks from within, betrayals, are part of the curriculum of repetition. The castle enforces the trial so the lesson may be rehearsed until learned. Consider one specific example, the story of the chamber's reopening. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, first in 1943, when Tom Riddle was a student, and then in 1992, and, if the loop holds, even beyond those, the cycle demands the hidden chamber rise again. Each time, the same elements align, a new heir of Slytherin, or a proxy, a young student hearing voices, the serpent lurking, and the chamber's door re-emerging. The prophecy of repetition is built into Hogwarts itself. In the words of the school's own legacy, the Chamber of Secrets has been opened before. It has happened to others. The book gives us enemies of the air, beware. The prophecy warns not of one event, but of recurrence. In other words, Hogwarts is constructed so that some old danger, not fully vanquished, will someday return. If the loop is maintained by spells laid by the founders, one imagines that the enchantment is ancient, powerful, and carefully balanced. Perhaps Salazar Slytherin's cunning mind foresaw that any school of magic over centuries would erode into chaos or obsolescence. To protect Hogwarts, he and his co-founders bound it, not to eternity in a simple sense, but to cyclical eternity, a localized time sphere that feeds back on itself. Within that sphere, the castle is eternal, a place outside time, or wrapped into its own chronology. The founders become less architects than time mechanics. They laid not only stone and spells, but a foundation of chronology, insisting that Hogwarts never move wholly forward. We must think, then, what it means to be a student in Hogwarts under such a loop. One may enter under the illusion of linear progression, year 1, year 2, onward, but the deeper structure is circular. Every lesson, triumph, failure, betrayal is destined to revisit. The students may age, change, leave, but the lessons repeat. Perhaps the point is that magic without wisdom is doomed to relapse into catastrophe, and Hogwarts ensures that until humankind finally learns, the loop endures. The cycle is pedagogical and punitive. Hogwarts teaches through reliving failure until memory ascends to insight. One might object, if Hogwarts is locked in cyclic time, what about McGonagall, Dumbledore, or Snape? They seem to evolve. But perhaps they are exceptions, anchors of continuity who remember across loops, guardians of institutional memory. Dumbledore, for instance, hints at wisdom beyond years. He is not wholly a repeating character. He has narrative weight. But he too must operate within constraints. His memory may guide small divergences, but the loop reasserts itself. Snape's bitter loyalty or Umbridge's tyranny reoccur because Hogwarts demands their recurrence. They too are rehearsals of ancient conflicts. Let us inspect the moment in Order of the Phoenix, when Harry enters the Department of Mysteries and faces the veil. The veil, an archway that trembles and whispers, is itself a threshold between life and death, permanence and oblivion. The castle guards it, or perhaps time guards it. The veil is always there. No matter which loop you enter, the veil awaits.
Similarly, the room of requirement appears as needed. In every cycle, it reconfigures itself. The room is a shapeshifter, a mirror of need, yet it also embodies repetition. Its magic is responsive, but within fixed constraints. Hogwarts always gives what is just demanded, but only within programmed forms. The loop allows variation, but forbids irrevocable change. Another specific textual moment cries out to be read in looped light. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione turns her time turner to attend multiple classes, but she is cautioned that, if you use it too many times, the effect is unstable. That is canonical recognition that time is delicate. The time turner is tethered to a closed loop. You must return to the time and place the time turner was used. The consistency principle, Novikov's self-consistency, holds no paradoxes can disrupt the loop because the events you perform in the past already are part of the timeline. In effect, the time turner does not allow wholesale rewriting of the past. It just threads within the established groove. If Hogwarts is a larger scale loop, the time turner is its miniature echo. The loop of Hogwarts is the master, and the time turner is a subset. One might think of Hogwarts's history as stratified layers of loops, micro-loops, class to class, day to day, meso-loops, year-to-year curriculum cycles, and macro-loops, centuries of dark returns. In each scale, the castle repeats its own script. When the dark mark appears in Goblet of Fire, it is not a one-off event, but a performance that must recur. When Umbridge asserts control in Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's army reopens, and the Ministry invades Hogwarts. These patterns echo earlier cycles of control and resistance. The pattern is inexorable. Each generation must relive certain confrontations until the wizarding world truly learns its lesson. This loop explains the uncanny sense of déjà vu Hogwarts gives even to readers. We see situations that feel familiar: betrayal, hidden enemies, secret chambers, forbidden magic. We console ourselves that this time is different, yet the same structural tensions reassert themselves. Because Hogwarts is not linear history, it's myth in motion, iterated until meaning is found. Magic without wisdom is dangerous. The loop enforces that lesson by compulsion. If Hogwarts repeats eternally, one wonders whether any true progress can be made. Can the wizarding world ever break free? Perhaps the only way out is an innovation outside the loop, wisdom so radical it reprograms the enchantment itself. But that may require magic beyond ordinary wizarding ambition. In this framework, the triumph over Voldemort in Deathly Hallows is not an end of history, but a pause in the loop's narration until the loop reawakens. The final battle wins one cycle, but the cycle demands it will recur, unless someone breaks the spell of repetition entirely. One could imagine that Harry's final act, believing in mercy, restoring faith, choosing to face death rather than destroy, is precisely the wisdom that disrupts the loop. Perhaps what Hogwarts has been teaching all along is that magic unchecked, vengeance untempered, cycles of violence repeating, only produce ruin. So, the ultimate lesson in this theory is that one must transcend repetition to transform, not repeat. In that sense, Hogwarts is not a prison but a classroom. The castle forces students through the same moral test until someone passes with insight. The loop is the ultimate exam. Until humanity shows it can wield magic with restraint and insight, the loop continues. The founders may have anticipated that no civilization of magic would last unless it learned not just power, but responsibility. The loop is the enforcement of that moral discipline. When we read the epigraph of the Sorcerer's Philosopher's Stone, we see how Hogwarts cultivates both wonder and risk. Each new generation thinks, "This is my story," unaware they are characters in an eternal play. The castle watches, waits, and resets the stage. And we, as readers or as future children entering Platform 934, step into the loop ourselves. We feel the thrill of discovery, but we are dooming ourselves to repeat lessons not yet learned. Thus, during every feast, every house song, every Quidditch match, every Defense Against the Dark Arts lecture, Hogwarts is replaying motifs from epochs past. The Slytherin scheme, the Gryffindors rally, the Ravenclaws puzzle, the Hufflepuffs persevere. Each house is archetypal, each student role a permutation. The ghosts watch with mild bemusement. They have seen this many times before. The Sorting Hat sings of bravery, wisdom, cunning, loyalty, not as ideals to achieve once, but as eternal trials to re-meet. Imagine then a student who becomes aware, someone, like Harry, who senses repetition, who feels the weight of returning shadows. That student might begin to see patterns others dismiss as coincidence, that Snape's mercurial enmity always recurs, that betrayal always hides in the wings. That student might try to break one microcycle, refuse to react some predictable behavior, or refuse to trust or refuse to respond. But the loop will strain to reabsorb the change. The castle resists transformation. Only a change of heart in the moral axis might break the loop's inertia. Let me evoke one more concrete moment.
In Half-Blood Prince, the memory of Tom Riddle's origin in the orphanage, his early cunning, the dormant Horcrux ambition, all repeat in Draco Malfoy's torment and in Voldemort's resurrection. The past shadows the present. When Harry sees the memory of the young Tom asking Professor Dumbledore why Muggleborns are despised, he learns the root of the hatred. But that memory is not just historical. It is alive, looping inside Hogwarts. Draco, tormented by the Dark Mark, echoes that youthful ambition again. This is not coincidence, but looped dramaturgy. The future replays the past until someone alters the dynamic fundamentally. In reading the books under this theory, one begins to see less an ever-progressing plot, and more a spiral staircase curling around tragedy, hope, hubris, and redemption. The chapters are more variations than developments. The climax of one book becomes the prologue of the next loop. Even iconic phrases like, "the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord," or "there is no good and evil, only power, and those too weak to seek it," recur as rallying cries within looped myth. They echo like incantations in the halls of time. And so we return to the core message. Hogwarts's hidden structure may be a temporal cage. It repeats the same moral lesson. Magic without wisdom leads to destruction. But repetition is the mechanism of inculcation. The founders may have judged that only through infinite rehearsal could humanity eventually learn. Until that wisdom blossoms, Hogwarts will reset, the cycle will respin, and new students will walk those same corridors, hearing ancient echoes in every lecture, facing new versions of old shadows. The castle lives not forward, but in eternal return, as a trial, a teacher, a prison of time, and a crucible for the souls brave enough to break the cycle. Number 19. The secret meaning of Patronuses. Under the cold, silvery light of the moon, Harry Potter once stood by the lake at Hogwarts, his wand raised, as a blinding stag erupted from its tip and charged at a swarm of Dementors. That shining creature, born from the deepest part of his heart, was not just a charm, it was a revelation. A Patronus was never only about defense, it was about identity. In that moment, Harry was not simply performing magic, he was showing the universe who he truly was. Every witch and wizard who ever cast a Patronus revealed something intimate, a fragment of their soul shaped by memory, pain, and hope. The Patronus charm was described as the most difficult defensive spell in existence, but that statement never captured its essence. When Remus Lupin taught Harry Expecto Patronum, he said that a Patronus was a kind of positive force, a projection of the very things that the Dementor feeds upon. Yet even Lupin's calm wisdom barely scratched the surface. For a Patronus is not only light, it is a mirror. It reflects not what we show the world, but what we hide from it. It reveals who we are when no one else is watching. In the magical world, few creatures are more personal than a Patronus, because its form cannot be chosen, faked, or imitated. It comes from within, shaped by the memories and wounds of the caster. Harry's stag was a tribute to his father, James Potter, whose animalgus form was also a stag. But beneath that connection lies something even more profound, Harry's longing for the family he lost. The stag was not just his father's shadow, it was Harry's way of keeping him alive, an embodiment of his own courage and grief woven together. When Severus Snape produced a silver doe matching Lily Potter's Patronus, it was one of the most heartbreaking revelations in the entire saga. It proved that Patronuses could evolve, that love, loss, and guilt could transform their form entirely. For years, Snape's soul had been reshaped by his devotion to Lily, a devotion that survived death itself. His Patronus did not reflect his profession, nor his bitterness, nor even his intellect. It reflected his eternal penance. As Dumbledore said in that quiet, devastating moment, After all this time? And Snape replied, always. That single word explained everything about the nature of a changing Patronus. It is not an act of will, it is the soul's confession. But if the Patronus reveals truth, why do some witches and wizards lose it entirely? In the darkest corners of the wizarding world, there are stories of those who could no longer summon one. When a person's heart becomes clouded by despair, the magic fades, because the Patronus does not respond to intellect or power. It responds to faith. The loss of a Patronus is the loss of self-belief, a spiritual silence where once there was music. J.K. Rowling once wrote that Dolores Umbridge, despite her cheerful smile and pink cardigan, could never cast a true Patronus after her imprisonment in Azkaban. Her soul had curdled, her joy corrupted by cruelty. What she called light was only control, and light born from control is not light at all. Contrast this with Luna Lovegood, whose Patronus took the form of a hare, graceful, curious, and whimsical, much like herself. Luna's world was full of sorrow. Her mother had died when she was young, yet her Patronus shone brightly. That paradox captures a deep truth. Pain does not extinguish the Patronus, it refines it. Luna did not deny her sadness, she embraced it as part of who she was. And so her light remained pure. The same cannot be said for those who twisted their pain into hatred. The absence of a Patronus among Death Eaters is not a coincidence. They could not summon them because their magic no longer flowed from love, but from domination. Their souls had turned inward, devouring themselves. Even Voldemort, who had mastered death and conquered countless forms of magic, could not summon one. It was not that he didn't know the incantation, it was that he no longer possessed the humanity required to produce it. Every Patronus tells a story of evolution. Nymphadora Tonks's Patronus changed from a jackrabbit to a wolf after she fell in love with Remus Lupin. The world often reduces that transformation to romance, but it was something more. Tonks's love was unrequited for a time, marked by rejection and pain. Lupin feared passing his curse onto her, pushing her away. Yet her Patronus changed anyway. It reflected not only her affection, but also her resilience, her refusal to let suffering destroy her tenderness. Her soul had evolved, and the Patronus followed. There is a moment in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows that few readers pause to interpret deeply. When Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest to face Voldemort, his heart calm, his mind clear, he does not cast a Patronus. For the first time, he doesn't need to. The light, once external, now burns within him. The Patronus, in its truest sense, had merged with his being. He no longer needed a creature to protect him from fear. He had become his own protection. That is the ultimate evolution of the soul, when the magic of the heart no longer needs to be spoken aloud. The Patronus, then, is more than a spell of light. It is a chronicle of a life. It records, silently, the transformations of its caster. When we look at a Patronus, we see not just the present, but the past, every heartbreak, every victory, every forgiveness. In that sense, the Patronus is the most honest magic in existence. It cannot lie, and it cannot hide. The symbolism of animal form is not arbitrary either. The corporeal Patronus, the kind that takes shape, is a manifestation of identity solidified by experience. Minerva McGonagall's cat, Patronus, mirrors her animagus form, signifying harmony between her inner self and her chosen discipline. Meanwhile, Kingsley Shacklebolt's Lynx embodies leadership and grace under pressure. Each one is a coded reflection of who they are when stripped of titles and expectations. And yet, even the strongest Patronus can fade. There are moments when Harry himself failed to summon his stag, moments when grief overwhelmed even his hope. When Sirius Black fell through the veil, Harry's light faltered. That failure was not weakness, it was humanity.
The Patronus feeds on joy, but its source is not mere happiness. It is acceptance. Only when Harry stopped fighting the pain and let it become part of him could the stag return. This idea that a Patronus evolves with the soul reshapes how we view the entire story. Every major character's relationship with their Patronus mirrors their inner journey.
Dumbledore's Phoenix, for example, echoes his lifelong fascination with rebirth and redemption. Like Fawkes, he rose from the ashes of his own moral failures, his sister's death, his youthful arrogance, and found wisdom through remorse. His Patronus was not simply majestic, it was an acknowledgement of his cycle of destruction and renewal. On the opposite end stands the tragedy of Remus Lupin. His wolf nature, a curse he loathed, kept him from fully embracing joy. Though he could cast a Patronus, it was weaker than before, a reflection of the conflict within him. Lupin once said, "It's the quality of one's convictions that determines success, not the number of followers." That truth applied to him as much as anyone else. His Patronus flickered between strength and fragility, depending on how much he forgave himself. Even Hermione Granger, whose intellect could dissect almost any spell, recognized that the Patronus charm was different. Her otter Patronus symbolized curiosity and loyalty, qualities she had always embodied. But during the darkest times of the Horcrux hunt, even she struggled to summon it. The endless days in the forest tested not her knowledge, but her spirit. She learned, painfully, that no book could teach her how to believe again. The Patronus charm stands apart from all other spells for one reason: it demands surrender. The caster must abandon calculation and open themselves entirely. As Dumbledore once said, happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light. That light is not a metaphor, it is the Patronus. It is the soul remembering its own brightness. When Harry taught the DA how to summon Patronuses in Order of the Phoenix, each student's form was different, a menagerie of spirits, otters, horses, swans, and foxes. What united them was not the shape, but the feeling behind it. Each Patronus reflected a moment of purity that the caster chose to hold on to, despite the chaos of war. In that classroom, among fear and rebellion, a generation of young witches. And wizards learned that strength did not come from wands or spells, but from memory, from the stubborn act of choosing hope. There is an irony hidden within this charm. The happier the memory, the greater the light, yet those who have suffered most often produce the strongest Patronuses. Harry, Snape, Tonks, and Lupin all bore immense sorrow. Their pain refined their joy like fire refines metal. It burned away illusion and pride, leaving only truth. The Patronus does not respond to shallow happiness. It responds to love that has survived despair. This is why the idea that the Patronus can change is not just magical trivia. It is proof that souls can evolve. When Tonks's Patronus became a wolf, it was a sign that she had crossed an invisible threshold from innocence to understanding. When Snape's became a doe, it was his confession, not to others, but to himself. And if Harry's stag one day faded into something new, it would not mean he lost his father's spirit, but that he finally became his own. There is a certain melancholy beauty in the notion that magic, at its highest form, requires vulnerability. The Patronus exposes everything we are and everything we've lost. To cast it is to stand before the darkness naked and unafraid. Dementors can drain warmth and hope, but they cannot touch the truth at the spell's core. When the light bursts forth, it is not just a spell, it is a declaration. I am still here. The Patronus teaches that no one remains unchanged. Love alters the soul, grief reshapes it, and time refines it. The animal we once summoned in our youth may no longer fit the person we have become. This is not loss, it is growth.
Just as a phoenix must burn to be reborn, the heart must break to know its strength. The new Patronus, different from the old, is not a replacement but a continuation, a new chapter written in light. Even in the quiet moments after the war, one can imagine Harry standing by that same lake, no longer surrounded by dementors, but by memory. If he raised his wand now, what would appear? Perhaps still a stag, perhaps something else. Whatever it would be, it would tell the story of who he has become, a man who has carried darkness and turned it into light. That, after all, is the ultimate magic, not defeating evil, but transforming pain into power. In the end, the Patronus is not about joy or love or even defense. It is about evolution, the constant unfolding of the soul. It reminds us that light is not the absence of darkness, but its transformation.
The world of wizards measures power in spells, wands, and duels, but the Patronus stands alone, a spell that cannot be learned, only lived. Those who can cast it are not simply strong, they are awake, and those whose Patronus changes have not lost themselves. They have found a deeper truth, because the Patronus, in all its silvery brilliance, is the language of the heart. It speaks when words fail, burns when hope flickers, and endures when all else fades. In its glow, the soul whispers its most sacred secret. I have suffered, I have changed, but I am still light. Number 20. The mystery of the portraits. In the silent corridors of Hogwarts, the painted faces in the frames watch. They murmur, shift, glance from one canvas to another, and on occasion drift across walls to peer in unfamiliar rooms. These portraits are not mere illusions or static portraits with tricks of glass and paint, at least not in the sense that most witches and wizards believe. There is a hidden complexity in them, a secret no one quite speaks aloud, that these portraits may preserve more than memory. They may hold within them fragments of the soul of the subject, a kind of soft immortality, neither full life nor mere echo. From the first time Harry stands before the portrait of Dumbledore in the headmaster's office, he senses an uncanny presence, not a ghost, not a dead man resurrected, but something else. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2, when Harry addresses Dumbledore's portrait, the school's walls fall momentarily silent, beaming and mopping their eyes, as though the portraits themselves feel emotion. The portrait responds to him, honest, gentle, guiding. It is a kind of voice beyond two dimensions, rooted in something deeper than ink on canvas. Could that voice arise from something more than enchantment? Consider the portraits of Hogwarts' former headmasters, Dumbledore, Armando Dippet, Phineas Nigellus Black. We are told their portraits are not just decorative, they counsel, warn and converse with their successors, as though the painted figure retains part of the person behind it. The official Harry Potter website states, "The wizarding world is filled with animated portraits of an array of colourful characters. Witches and wizards of note sit for portraits so their legacy can be retained long after they've passed." The phrase paint and memory is used to describe Dumbledore's portrait in The Cursed Child. I am paint and memory, Harry, paint and memory. But what is memory without identity? What is paint without essence? I propose that memory is animated by a sliver of true being. The portrait houses a shard of the soul that binds it to the living world. To speak of souls in the Potterverse is to tread in dark art. Horcruxes show that a wizard may split his soul and anchor it in objects. The fragment remains tethered to life, even if the body is destroyed. Horace Slughorn explains, "You split your soul, then hide part of it in an object. Even if one's body is attacked or destroyed, one cannot die, for part of the soul remains earthbound." That same logic could underlie the portraits. A wizard, upon sitting for a portrait, may imbue more than likeness, may allow a gentle transfer of essence, so that at death the portrait lives on, not by spell alone, but by spiritual thread. This would circumvent the cruelty of a Horcrux. No murder, no fragmented horror, no tethering of the soul to evil. But the cost is still grave. The subject becomes forever bound to the painted world, denied consummate rest, denied full agency. They become watchers, not actors. This hidden detail explains why most portraits are of owners, rulers, headmasters, figures of gravitas who, in life, would invest in their legacy. Dumbledore's portrait may speak with discernment because he prepared it, visited it, molded it with enchantment while alive. Indeed, the lore in the fandom suggests that headmaster portraits are painted before death, then kept secretly until the person dies, so that the portrait can be taught to act and speak like them to counsel successors. If a soul shard binds a portrait, then the act of training it is more than mimicry. It is guiding the soul fragment's echoes, shaping its memory. The painted Dumbledore is thus more than a representation. He is a piece of Dumbledore tempered by enchantment and guidance. Yet not every portrait is this profound.
Most Hogwarts paintings draw from simple enchantments, mimicry spells, memory extracts, less a soul fragment than a ghost of recollection. The Hogwarts Wiki clarifies, the degree to which a portrait can interact depends not on the painter's skill alone, but on the power of the witch or wizard painted. Some portraits are shallow, only able to echo catchphrases. Some, like the fat lady's portrait, indulge personal quirks, gossip, protection, temper. But those of past headmasters exhibit a quality absent in lesser works: depth. Counsel, foresight. Only a portrait carrying a soul fragment, not just illusion, could sustain such breadth over time. If one accepts the soul fragment hypothesis, several mysteries fall neatly into place. Why do portraits sometimes step into other frames, traveling distances within Hogwarts? Why do portraits speak of events after their subject's death? If the portrait carries a shard of the subject's soul, albeit attenuated, it may perceive ongoing history and communicate in a liminal realm. They do not fully live, but they experience time, breath, and continuity beyond memory. It is the difference between echo and voice. A portrait with a soul remnant hears new events, feels new energies, and may choose to speak from places far from the original frame. Further, such a theory frames the portraits as guardians of institutional memory. Headmasters may leave instructions, not in ink, but embedded in their portrait shard to counsel later generations. The portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black sometimes voices complaints, criticisms, and strategic insight. For all his acerbic tone, many rely on him. Under the soul model, he is more than a cranky informant. He is actively present in Hogwarts governance, a spiritual advisor. That power suggests lines of transmission. The living headmaster might consult the portrait, as if consulting a tangled consciousness captive to canvas. The fragmented soul theory also casts light on the warning McGonagall gives Harry. Portraits don't represent even half of their subjects. Her caution is poignant. The portrait is not the person, but a mediated remnant. If something of the soul lives in the painting, it is only part, shaped, diminished, constrained by the frame, by enchantments, by the painter's interpretation, by the living curator's will. The portrait knows some, echoes some, sympathizes or recalls, but it lacks full self-will, full flesh, full presence. In the Deathly Hallows, when the portraits lining the corridors whisper at Harry's passing, murmuring respect and sorrow, they act in a unity of consciousness. The Book of the Phoenix whispers that in the afterlife souls may resonate across boundaries. Here, the portraits echo among each other. Their network of painted souls chat quietly of change in the castle, whisper warnings to one another, observe creeping shadows. It is as though Hogwarts itself houses a spectral congregation of souls bound in picture. The cost, again, is that each soul fragment
cannot leave, cannot wander beyond the portrait's confines except via frame jumps, cannot regain corporeal flesh. They remain witnesses. Take, for example, the portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black. As a black family patriarch and a headmaster, he sat for his portrait before death. In the books he appears complaining about the quality of successive headmasters, yet providing counsel to Dolores Umbridge and later to Harry via indirect means. His portrait travels between frames within Hogwarts and even contacts the Black family home. He senses changes in political power, knows about Umbridge's decrees, and warns of hazards. Under the soul fragment model, his painted remnant retains enough personality and perception to act strategically over decades. His voice is not mere enchantment, but a fragment of Nigellus's self, shaped by the painter and refined by magical instruction. One more telling example. The massive portrait behind the headmaster's chair that weeping Dumbledore addresses in Deathly Hallows. It is described, but Harry had eyes only for the man who stood in the largest portrait directly behind the headmaster's chair. Tears were sliding down, and the pride and gratitude emanating from him. The portrait weeps, feels pride, emanates gratitude. Those are hardly simple programmed gestures. They suggest emotional resonance. That resonance would best be explained by a soul shard capable of forming genuine emotional response, not empty mimicking. And the portrait falls respectfully silent when Harry speaks. That discipline, that presence, betrays something internal, not just external. This model also casts a moral shadow. What does it mean to bind a soul fragment to perpetuity? Even if no murder is involved, the person is denied death's release. They become forever watchers, unable to rest, unable to reincarnate, denied full peace. In folklore, spirits cursed to haunt halls suffer. Here the portraits live in a middle ground, not exactly alive, not entirely dead. The choice of who becomes a portrait shard may therefore carry weight. Only those strong, disciplined, wise, but also willing to submit to that liminal fate. Perhaps portraits are offered to those who accept being guardians of Hogwarts across time. The theory also predicts limitations. A portrait's shard cannot act fully independent. It cannot leave the domain of painting magic, cannot summon corporeal limbs, cannot contravene the artist's programming. It remains tethered. That is why portraits cannot move freely as wizards do. They drift from frame to frame, but cannot walk the halls in living flesh. They are ghosts obeying a geometrical prison. Also, the fragment is but partial. It lacks raw power, new creative will, capacity to cast new magic. It can only counsel, observe, recollect, warn within constraints. If one accepts this, the portraits across Hogwarts form a dim pantheon of souls in residence. McGonagall's portrait may carry a fragment of her will. Dumbledore's portrait holds residual wisdom, counsel, and memory. Phineas Nigellus's painting carries political memory. Even the portrait of Elphias Doge might retain loyalty pulses. Each communicates within its niche, bound by walls, by frames, by enchantments. When new headmasters consult Dumbledore's portrait, they interface not with a clever painting, but with a soul echo. The success of that counsel depends on how much essence was allowed to imprint at the time of portrait creation. This hidden detail, seldom acknowledged, elevates the portraits from decorative magical curiosities to part of Hogwarts' living soul. The paintings are not passive, they are sentient custodians. They are not mere memory, but memorialized essence. The school walls do not just host images, they house fragments of life. And the cost to those fragments is heavy. They are bound forever to watch, to remember, to counsel, but never to act, never to rest. That is the secret truth no Hogwarts tour guide tells. Number 21. Dementors, children of despair. There is a hidden detail in the very nature of Dementors that few ever contemplate. They are not merely creatures birthed by nature, but rather
unwitting byproducts of human magic and suffering, the children of despair.
In the cold stone corridors of Azkaban, long before the Ministry ever imprisoned witches and wizards there, legends whisper of a darker, older prison for rogue spellcasters, long ago destroyed or sealed away. In that place, where tortured screams once echoed and grief was piled by the cartload, the first Dementors were born, not by design, but by the seismic accumulation of emotional energy. They are not mere parasites. They are the lingering memory of agony, animated and hungry. Each Dementor feeds on what it lacks: warmth, joy, peace. But more fundamentally, each Dementor remembers. When one drifts through a castle corridor or hovers outside a window in the dead of night, it carries in its very substance the sorrow of a place. It is as though the walls themselves, impregnated with loss, exhaled them. At Azkaban, the sorrow of thousands of isolated souls, prisoners tortured and abused, gave birth to an entire brood. That is why they do not simply vanish when repelled by a Patronus or banished. They replicate, spread, multiply, like mold in damp despair. In considering this, we must revisit what little is said in canonical text. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Rowling describes Dementors as black, hooded, faceless beings that drain your soul, or at least your happiest memories. But she also emphasizes that if it can't feed on something, it moves on. The text frames them as hunters of emotion, but never suggests that they carry that emotion themselves. Here lies the secret. They do not merely consume happiness, they are the residual form of suffering. That explains why they shudder in places untouched by pain or laughter. They become inert where life is vibrant. They can only survive where emptiness has already reigned. Consider the specific example of the tower cell block in Azkaban. In canonical law, the Ministry converted an existing fortress into the prison. Suppose that original structure, centuries before, had served as a tribunal for dark wizards, executing them, torturing them, consigning them to secret cells beneath the earth. Over decades or centuries, each death cry, each despairing echo, each suicide or broken soul might leave an imprint. When the Ministry began locking away criminals there, it only added fuel to the fire. The first Dementors, then, were drawn from that ambient energy. They were born from the same place where pain had festered for centuries. Over time, as more prisoners were brought, their suffering would feed further new Dementors. The prison thus becomes self-sustaining, an engine of sorrow. Behind that theory lies the most chilling thought. Dementors are evolving memory. In each new wisp of mist, in each slow glide across a corridor, one glimpses the swirl of remembered anguish, not only from their current victim, but from aeons of tragedy layered upon tragedy. This perspective explains why they cannot simply be destroyed. You would have to erase the memory of pain itself. Their proliferation is tied to human suffering. So long as we imprison, torture, exile, or abandon, their brood will continue to thrive. Take, for instance, a lesser-known Azkaban block, the forgotten southwest wing, supposedly unused, sealed off after structural damage. In our theory, that wing eventually housed stealthy passages that allowed Dementors to leak outward, to drift unseen into remote regions where magical tragedy had occurred, say, a cursed battlefield or a village decimated by a plague. Once there, they find fresh sorrow to imbibe, and so they anchor themselves. Over time, they become entities of territory, guardians of grief, spreading ever outward from epicenters of human anguish. In this reading, a Dementor is less an external invader and more an echo, an elemental sorrow, a viable monument built from collective despair. When Harry sits on the Hogwarts Express and senses fits of cold dread or terror in the tunnels, those are not random attacks, but echoes of distant torture, residual legions slowly advancing along ley lines of human torment. Their presence near Hogwarts in the forest or near the Black Lake may be because, in earlier epochs, tragedies unfolded in those trees, on those shores,
commanding the birth of latent dementors, now asserting themselves again when human cruelty returns. Let us name one. Imagine a particular dementor, call it the first of Azkaban, which the prisoners in Dark Whispers named Mornagloom. Mornagloom is the genealogical root of many others, a creature whose memories contain centuries of suffering, whose aura is intolerable even to lesser dementors. When it glides through the corridor, even other dementors recoil, for its grief is too raw, too pure.
That being remembers the ruin of an ancient warlock uprising, the slaughter in subterranean dungeons, the betrayal of coven members. Its existence became the nucleus for the first wave. All others are its spiritual children, born of derivative suffering. Suppose that Morngloom once drifted beyond Azkaban, across the North Sea, to a ruined castle in Scotland, where centuries ago a disastrous duel tore apart a wizarding family, leaving ruin and heartbreak. There it nested, feeding on spectral echoes of regret and fear. In time, other dementors followed its trail, drawn to the same aura. The castle's crumbling towers became a hive. Thus a cluster of dementors can trace their ancestry to a focal point of violence, as if suffering seeds them. That cluster can migrate, like spores, infecting other sites of darkness. The canonical text gives hints. When Harry confronts the Dementors by the lake, he relives nightmares, like the voices of his past. Rowling writes, "He heard Hagrid sobbing. He saw his parents turn, heard their horror, smelled the smoke of the fire." That passage shows that Dementors not only draw out existing memories, but can reactivate memories in new victims, merging their own reservoir of despair with the psyche of the prey. The Dementor becomes a bridge between past misery and present vulnerability. In our hypothesis, this capacity stems from their core identity as beacons of collective trauma. What they do to victims is resonantly more devastating than mere memory theft. One consequence of this theory is that places saturated with darkness will always host Dementors, even without direct human intervention. Castles ruined by war, ruins of prisons, battlefields where thousands died, the boundaries of the wizarding world and muggle world intermingling in death. These are the breeding grounds. Whenever human magic inflicts grave suffering, mass imprisonment, torture, execution, obliteration, those sites become incubators. The Ministry, by erecting Azkaban, inadvertently created a super-incubator. In consequence, each Atlantean-like prison of the wizarding world is potentially vulnerable. Ask yourself, were there others before Azkaban? Suppose a subterranean prison in the warlord era of medieval wizarding Britain, the Vault of Oracles, where heretics were jailed centuries ago. That site, forgotten, may have generated Dementors long ago. Their progeny now colonize multiple prisons. In fact, Dementors across Europe may all trace genealogical descent to a few ancient epicenters of suffering. This perspective reframes the role of the Dementor Guard in the Ministry. Far from simply fencing prisoners, they are shepherds of sorrow, caretakers of human despair. When wizards imprison criminals, they feed the system, not only by throwing them in, but by enriching the ancestral matrix of anguish. The more despair the incarcerated feel, the more Dementors are nourished. The system becomes self-reinforcing. The Ministry's reliance on Dementors as guards is thus akin to employing disease as defense. Recall, in the text, Barty Crouch Sr. is mentioned as one who never used Dementors outside wartime or prisons, fearing their corruption. This hint suggests that the magical establishment felt unease over unleashing these memory monsters on the populace. Why would that be? Because each Dementor is a walking testament to suppressed guilt, war crimes, executions, betrayals. Enable such creatures outside containment, and they risk revealing state secrets, memories of atrocities. They carry in them the silent history of tragedies we try to bury. When the Death Eaters overtook large swathes of Britain, when Muggle-borns were hunted, mass fear and anguish erupted. The large number of Dementors around Hogwarts during the Battle of Hogwarts may well have been nourished not just by the violence of war, but by the psychic energy of countless tortured wizards, broken families, betrayed friends. The ultimate siege of human suffering generates clusters of Dementors drawn to the epicenter. In that scenario, the wizards did not call them. They responded automatically, seeded ages ago in hidden sites. There is also poetic symmetry. Dementors, children of despair, cannot create life. They feed but only in emptiness, so to truly destroy them, one must heal the wounds of suffering, transform the tortured soil back to fertile ground. The customary Patronus charm does not annihilate, it drives them away. But to prevent their return, the well of grief must dry up. In places where joy, hope, and humanity are restored, they shrivel, cannot feed, and vanish. This accords with Rowling's line, "Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light." Under this lens, when Harry conjures his powerful Patronus against the Dementors by the lake, he is not merely repelling creatures, he is denying their memory. He is injecting hope, warmth, defiance, undermining their ancestral root. He is, in effect, healing a wound. When he stands firm, he becomes a living antidote to despair, driving out the monster memory that believed it still held sway. We might go further and suggest that every powerful emotional event in wizarding history left potential seeds for Dementor gestation. Not only tragic acts, but massacres of magical folk, betrayals, purges. One could map Dementor lineages across Europe by tracing locations of magical genocide or magical conspiracies. Each cluster is a palimpsest of pain. One might even propose that the Dementors have rudimentary collective intelligence. They communicate through sorrow lines, sending whispers along ley alignments of historical trauma. When one site pulses with fresh suffering, Dementors spread a resonance, drawing brethren to converge. They do not coordinate by voice, but by resonance of grief. It is as if the land itself moans and others answer. Thus, when Snape enters the corridors of Azkaban to deliver a prisoner, he is not simply navigating a prison. He walks through a neural network of despair. The aura around him is thick with echoes of centuries of agony. The Dementors that glide near him are partially siblings of the same ancestral mourner-gloom, sharing shards of memory, drawn across time to swirl around him. In summation of our hidden detail, Dementors are children, forged by human suffering, born from amassed anguish, unable to exist apart from places poisoned by grief. Their uncanny strength, immortality, and proliferation are not supernatural gifts, but byproducts of emotional energy. They multiply where suffering is greatest, in places saturated with despair, and they carry in them the memory of every cry, every echo, every lonely death. To eliminate Dementors forever, one must not only repel them, but purge the gravitational sorrow that birthed them, restore those haunted places, heal the grief, illuminate the darkness. Until then, they will drift across the magical world, children of despair, memory made flesh, ever vigilant where pain dwells. Number 22. Gringotts and the Magic of Blood. In the wizarding world, few places carry the same aura of awe and danger as Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Visitors remember the marble floors, the cold air that hums with enchantment, and the sharp eyes of goblins who seem to see not only the weight of your gold, but the truth of your soul. The popular belief is simple. Goblins love gold. They hoard, count, and polish it with obsessive precision. But beneath this well-known obsession lies a darker, more ancient power. Goblin-made magic predates the wands of wizards, and unlike human sorcery, it doesn't rely on incantations or channeling through wood. It is bound by something far older: blood. Every vault in Gringotts is not just locked by keys or curses. It is sealed by the blood of the family it belongs to. When Hagrid took Harry Potter to Gringotts in the Philosopher's Stone, readers saw only the surface, the key that opened the small vault, the pile of gold that belonged to Harry's parents, and the mystery of the high security vault that held the Philosopher's Stone. But few noticed what really happened. The goblin who led them, Griphook, never asked Harry for identification. He never doubted that the boy was indeed a Potter. If anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried to open this vault, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped inside, Hagrid said, half-jokingly. Yet when Harry touched his vault's gold, the magic of Gringotts accepted him instantly. There was no spell, no check, only the silent recognition of his bloodline. This detail reveals something fascinating. The bank doesn't operate through ordinary wizarding logic. The goblin systems recognize lineage, not ownership. When Lily and James Potter died, their vault didn't fall into bureaucratic limbo. It responded to the continuation of their blood. Harry didn't inherit his fortune by legal decree. The vault itself acknowledged him. The ancient goblin magic that tied the vault to the Potter's blood activated once more when it sensed their living descendant. It is not paperwork that passes inheritance in Gringotts. It is recognition of life force. Goblin-made objects are known for their extraordinary properties. The goblin-forged sword of Godric Gryffindor, for instance, absorbs what makes it stronger. It takes in only that which makes it more powerful, says Griphook in the Deathly Hallows. When Harry kills the basilisk, the sword drinks the venom and becomes impregnated with its power. That sword recognizes true worth, not words. The same kind of ancient craftsmanship lies behind the vaults. Goblin enchantments respond to essence, a wordless acknowledgement of blood, intention, and right. Wizards cannot replicate it. Their spells are mechanical. Goblin magic is alive. The deeper one goes into Gringotts, the more intense this connection becomes. The vaults of old families, such as the Blacks, Malfoys, and Potters, are guarded not merely by dragons or enchanted doors, but by living wards, spells that react to blood heritage. This is why trespassing in Gringotts is considered madness. The very air around a vault can sense an intruder. It was not the dragon alone that attacked Harry, Ron, and Hermione during their heist in the Deathly Hallows. The ancient blood wards felt their foreign essence. They had used Polyjuice Potion to disguise Hermione as Bellatrix Lestrange, but the vault did not care about appearances. The Lestrange bloodline was not in that room. The enchantment recognized the deception instantly. When the trio entered the Lestrange vault, the multiplying treasure, the Gemino curse, wasn't just a clever trap. It was part of a defense system designed to repel outsiders by overwhelming them with the greed they did not rightfully possess. It was not random magic, but blood-triggered punishment. Only a true Lestrange would have been able to control it or escape unscathed. Every vault in Gringotts carries this same curse of identity. It is both a guardian and a judge, recognizing its master's blood as sacred. This concept of blood recognition raises an unsettling possibility. If vaults respond to blood, then the power to alter blood magic would grant the ability to steal inheritance itself. In theory, a wizard who could change his blood signature could claim not only another family's vault, but their very legacy. It would mean more than stealing wealth. It would mean rewriting magical identity. There are whispers that this is precisely what dark wizards once sought. Voldemort, obsessed with immortality and domination, studied the boundaries of life and blood. While most remember him for creating Horcruxes, there are theories that his followers also researched goblin blood magic, ways to manipulate heritage through dark rituals. Consider the case of the Lestrange family. Bellatrix was known to be one of Voldemort's most loyal servants. Her vault in Gringotts held the Hufflepuff Cup,
one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Why entrust such a sacred object to her vault rather than his own hidden chamber? The answer may lie in the magic of lineage. Voldemort could not create a vault under his own name. He was a blood traitor to all wizarding lines, neither truly Riddle nor Gaunt. His blood was cursed, fragmented by dark magic, but by placing the Horcrux in Bellatrix's vault, he hid it behind the protective veil of her bloodline.
The cup was safe because the vault recognized only Lestrange blood as legitimate. Not even the Dark Lord could open it freely. The idea of manipulating blood magic is hinted at subtly throughout the series. The Triwizard Tournament's Goblet of Fire, for instance, recognizes names inscribed in magical contract form, a symbolic representation of magical identity. The same principle underlies the trace placed on underage wizards, the inheritance test at Gringotts, and the enchantments protecting noble houses. When Dumbledore tells Harry that love leaves its own mark, he isn't speaking only metaphorically. Lily Potter's sacrifice created a blood-based ward so strong that Voldemort himself could not touch Harry without agony. His mother's sacrifice made the bond of blood the strongest protection I know, Dumbledore says. That protection is the purest form of blood magic, the kind goblins understood long before wizards gave it a name. When one connects this to Gringotts, the pattern becomes clearer. The Potter's vault didn't merely contain coins. It was an extension of the same protective bloodline magic that saved Harry. The vault recognized the boy who carried his mother's love and his father's courage within his veins. This is why it opened without question. The goblins did not guard it out of trust. The magic of the vault itself acknowledged him. In the same way, if Harry had died as an infant, the vault would have died too, sealing itself forever, its connection severed. This principle also explains why goblins distrust wizards so deeply. Goblin magic is based on truth of essence, while wizard magic often bends it through wands and words. To goblins, wizards are thieves of purity, twisting natural magic for control. That is why Griphook tells Harry bitterly, "Wizards took what we made." They didn't just steal goblin-made artifacts. They stole the very idea of channeling power through symbols. Wizards refined goblin bloodcraft into wand lore, substituting blood with allegiance. But for goblins, true mastery lies in blood itself, in the inheritance of power, not the learning of it. There are old rumors among goblins of a lost ritual, one that allows the transfer of blood signatures. It was said that long ago, during the early days of the bank, a powerful family tried to deceive the goblins by changing their blood through alchemical means. The attempt ended in disaster. The vaults devoured their gold, melted their lineage seals, and erased the family from magical records. This legend is often dismissed by wizard historians, but goblins still tell it in whispers. They call it the Feast of Iron. It serves as a warning that Gringotts does not forgive false blood.